Assalamu alaikum, my friends, and welcome back to Jinka Jabo. We were sitting down for dinner at an Indian place after my English club. Shout out to my friends in Hanoi English Club. But we were getting dinner afterwards at an Indian place, and someone asked me if I wanted to say something, if I wanted to say a prayer before we ate, which is something that I should be doing, which is something that I'm trying to integrate now, but it was great that someone actually asked me to do it. But I couldn't come up with anything to say, so I thought of the prayer that my friends in St. Louis, old Sunday school teacher, he used to say, and that was rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, go God go, which was hard to explain to non-native English speakers, but if I can try for a moment here, I would say that it's just an informal, friendly way of just celebrating God and affirming that God is there. And it's also, this was a family of Christian scientists, and they have a very different approach to God. But it's one that I think really fits in well with other churches that I've been to and been exploring. So anyway, to get right to the point, I've been reading up on Christian Science again. And I'm rereading the main textbook, Science and Health with the Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, which is a book that I've read twice. And the first time I read it, or the first time I saw it, I remember I was a child, and it was in a big box of my dad's books. I don't know why he had it. I don't know why anyone... I don't know what was so interesting, because when I asked him about Christian Science, he didn't really have much to say about it. I could tell that he hadn't read the book. That was many years ago, and then I rediscovered it when I was 19, which got me going to Christian Science services and Sunday school and all that. And it was all part of the Mother Church, and eventually I made my own journey, I guess, pilgrimage to different sites in Boston, including the Mother Church. But anyway, for those of you who aren't so familiar with it, it's a church founded by an American woman. In 1866, she had a terrible accident. She fell on the ice. That was sort of the apple hitting her on the head. Newton's apple was one of those experiences. That's when she had that epiphany. And she prayed to God and was saved based on, Jesus saying, well, people will heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers in my name. And that's on the seal of the Mother Church for the Church of Christian Science, and it's the first thing that I remember reading on the cover of Science and Health. And as a kid, thinking that sounded like fantasy. It didn't seem real to me at all. The idea that there could be resurrection, or the idea that people could take that seriously. I was much more skeptical, I would say, even though I certainly had the imagination, but I didn't have the world experience, the life experience, the book knowledge to really grasp it. And in a way, I didn't have that when I was 19 either. But I remember as soon as I finished reading it for the first time, I went to a Christian Science reading room, and I spoke to a woman there who a few years later she died, but a very older woman. And I asked her, well, what is death? And we got into a very brief conversation, but it's just a dialogue. But she introduced me. She said, you've got to meet my son. And I became friends with her son. Back in Wisconsin, they moved. But anyway, I'm learning more about it. Like, going back and reading it the third time has really... It's widened my appreciation for it, and it's also made me interested in doing some more independent research into Christian Science. And I was able to find a Christian Science church in New Jersey that actually broadcast their services, and I listened to it today, at night, of course. And so to find out that there is such a thing as independent Christian Science, that there are people who are followers, students of Mary Baker Eddy, who aren't part of the main church in Boston, which has had its fair share of problems. I do remember, actually, in fact, my first time when I visited the Mother Church finally was on an Easter Sunday, about 7 years ago, I would say. And I was surprised, like, there was so much seating inside of the church, but there weren't that many people there, which kind of saddened me, but it was also interesting to to be there, to be where she was. And it made me think, it made me ponder the future of the church. And I think it's very good that there is such a thing as independent study of Christian Science, or an independent church that isn't just repeating what the mother church is saying. I don't know if this is interesting to anyone. Big shout out, by the way, to any of my new subscribers, people that I've met. Many of them don't speak. There aren't native English speakers, but I am doing my best to speak slowly and without idioms. But going back to this idea of death, there are Christians here, Catholics here, but many people don't understand. It's not as part of our idiolects. It's not part of our speech patterns. Most of our idioms come from the Bible anyway. And so I had a chance today to explain, well, yes, the Christmas is for celebrating the birth of Jesus, but Easter itself celebrates not the death, but the resurrection. And it comes after Good Friday, when Jesus was executed, crucified. And that leads to the question, well, where is the body? And I saw a documentary that claimed that there's a site in India that claims to have the buried body of Jesus. There's this whole movement saying, well, they thought he was dead, but he wasn't on the cross that long, not long enough to die anyway. They didn't break his legs. They just thought he was dead, put him in, and, you can rationalize it, you can explain it. But in the end, I think that's kind of damaging to do, because what we're looking at is matter and spirit are opposites. And that's the point that Mary Baker Eddy drives home over and over again in her book. And it's the same point that I saw fleshed out so clearly and beautifully in both the Diamond Sutra and A Course in Miracles and other text works, ideas that I've thrown out on this channel so far. But really, that's all it comes down to, matter being superior to spirit. And what body are we looking for? We won't see the body because it won't be as we are. But when we are born into something else, then the body will be clear. Because this understanding that we have, these physical houses that we're in, these knots of consciousness and these opaque bodies, this opaque flesh that we are part of, that's not really the reality of life, because the life that we experience, the life that is coming through, and the ideas that I'm sharing right now, and the distance that is covered to get these ideas to you, whoever is watching them. When we see everything, when we look at life, when we look at time itself, we find that it all disappears in spirit. Under the microscope of spirit, matter disappears. That's one thing Mary Baker Eddy said. She also, at the end of the chapter on marriage, she discusses how there will come a time when children ask their parents, "Where do I come from?" And the children will say, "Well, we're your parents. We made you, and our parents made us." And the kid will say, "Well, is matter dependent on matter?" And I butchered that. I can't quote it entirely. I've read the book 2.5 times now, but I can't quote it all by memory. But that's one of those beautiful things. Even more so than A Course in Miracles, I keep going back to Science and Health. I can't put down her works, regardless of to the extent that I've been able to follow them, simply because she had such a poetic mind, and she was such a unusual person. She was feminine, but she was also feminist. She was religious, deeply Christian, but she believed in the equality of the sexes and even the superiority of the sexes. I could go on talking about feminism and Mrs. Eddy. But the point I wanted to make, now that we're 9 minutes into this video, is I wanted to talk about caterpillars. Because in Science and Health, Mary Baker Eddy says the spirit and the body are like the butterfly and the caterpillar. The butterfly does not return to go back and fraternize with the worm, as she puts it. When we become spiritual beings, the stuff about the flesh, even the day-to-day stuff that we trick ourselves into thinking like that, doesn't matter, because we're all part of one. There is only one moment, one holy instant. There's only one now. And that's what we're getting towards. And a metaphor, an earthly metaphor, even though it passes from one earthly form into another, is the caterpillar and the butterfly. And recently, in an article which I will link below, recently I say it was in 2012 when this was published, but it's been discovered or theorized that caterpillars and butterflies actually have different sets of DNA, and that the caterpillar dies to become, in effect, another species. So you can read the article. It's quite long, so I wasn't going to parse through it. I don't have as much knowledge about genetics and so on, but I thought that was an interesting idea, because if you look in nature, you could find evidence for so much that is spiritual. And I'm going to continue looking at it, continue examining this mode of thinking, and continue parsing these spiritual ideas, because that's what I'm into. Subscribers or not, but I love that you're listening to me. And have a wonderful Easter. You've had your wonderful Easter now already, I hope. Enjoy some ham. And don't go for curry. I had curry tonight, but it was okay, but it just didn't seem right. But anyway, masalama.